in America right here in this bill. So that we're not only going to tell you what the codes are going to be, but we're going to tell you how many people you need to hire to enforce this. Page 41, determine any geographic area within the contiguous United States that lacks a federal power marketing agency. Because, you know, we can't move power around the country without a federal power marketing agency. We do it today, but now we have to have a new government agency to do this. All California housing standards are now going to be imposed on every American community. You don't have the right to have your own building standards in your community or in your state. Hell no, the federal government's going to tell you what they are.
It quickly became clear why Pelosi and the Democratic leadership were desperate to keep the contents of the bill secret before the vote.
Now, because of this underlying bill, the federal government will virtually have control over every aspect of lives for the American people. It is time to stand up and say, we get to choose. We choose liberty or we choose tyranny. It's one of the two. The underlying bill represents the tyranny and the intervention of the federal government. It's our choice. What will we choose today? Will we choose liberty or will we choose tyranny?
And I know that we'll be facing the single moms that heard from last summer. They can't afford the gasoline bill. They can't afford the propane. You didn't do a great thing. You hurt some really decent families struggling, trying to make it, and this is going to be their death knell. It breaks my heart. I yield back.
It is, of course, a carbon tax on economic activity, farming, manufacturing, real production here inside the United States. It would tend to shut down even those miserable remains of an industrial economy that we still have after the collapse of the Detroit automakers and their related subcontractors and so forth.
Every home and business in the United States would be federally regulated and controlled. Mandatory home inspections will be carried out by federal inspectors, and it's all at the expense of the homeowner.
In New York, they're called the environmental police.
On this day, a surprise visit to a market in Brooklyn's Chinatown.
And every day you're not in compliance, you face huge fines.
Go to page 235. The Secretary may set and collect reasonable inspection fees to cover the cost of inspections required. So number one, they can come in, the federal government can come in and inspect your house and send you the bill. And if they find that you're out of compliance with this new federal code, the Secretary shall assess a civil penalty for violations of this section. And then further, going to page 236, each day of unlawful occupancy shall be considered a separate violation. We're setting up a global warming Gestapo that can literally come in, and now this new term, unlawful occupancy. So now living in your home is considered unlawful under this bill. This is ludicrous.
Worst of all, carbon czars in more than 35 federal agencies are given unlimited dictatorial power to tax all forms of carbon and carbon emissions. The Commissar Green Police openly brag that they will have the power to selectively enforce the new edicts on a case-by-case basis.
It's funny because when I tell people what I do for a living, the first response usually is, "You're with the environmental police?" There is no environment in New York City.
With this new power, the Green Mafia can take over the entire economy through selective enforcement.
We know, Madam Speaker, that this national energy tax will cost the American people $2 trillion. We know that. We know this will result in a loss of 2.5 million jobs every year for the American people. We know that. We know this will result in a reduced standard of living for Americans. We know that. What is the point and what's the benefit?
The same central banks that have stolen more than $50 trillion from national treasuries across the planet are now creating a new derivatives fraud through the cap-and-trade carbon tax system that dwarfs their previous Ponzi schemes.
We've just watched a financial meltdown in this country, the likes of which hasn't been seen in some time. Now, if people like credit default swaps, they're really going to like the carbon swaps that are going to occur and the carbon future swaps. We spent a full day in this committee last summer talking about the manipulation of the energy futures market in oil. We're going to create, I fear, another such system that people who have an inclination to react dishonestly to systems are going to actually have a new opportunity. Is that not a problem?
A select group of central banks are lobbying for the same legislation to be passed worldwide. Once the so-called green economy laws are in place, only global megacorporations and their subsidiaries will be allowed to do business. Van Jones, Barack Obama's first green job czar, has stated repeatedly on the record that the new green economy is only a cover for a complete revolution against capitalism and the total redistribution of wealth. But what Van Jones doesn't tell his sad followers is that the elite are bragging that the modern green movement was designed from its creation to destroy the middle class and transfer all wealth into the hands of a super elite. They're not doing this to uplift the poor. No, the goal is to enslave the planet and usher in a new dark age. Every nation on Earth is in the process of, or has already passed, its own set of carbon tax laws and regulations. If their plan is successful, every nation on Earth will not only pay tribute to the powerful world government, but every facet of human life will be regulated by the technocratic global planners. Under the carbon tax scheme, China, India, Mexico, and over 150 other nations are exempt from the global tax system. You see, the bankers already own and control the third world. Their final target is the middle class of the West. Once they've dismantled the economies of the United States, Europe, and Japan, they believe no one can stand in their way. In short, the New World Order is a global corporate takeover. In their global corporate state, there is no room for individuality, sovereignty, or independence. As their program begins to face more and more opposition, lawmakers and supporters of the man-made global warming hypothesis want laws to be passed, making it illegal to question their theories. Recently, the head of Greenpeace was forced to admit that the Arctic and Antarctic ice caps grow in the winter and shrink in the summer, and that this is all part of a natural process driven by the tilt of the Earth and the Sun.
The cosmic radiation coming from space, the amount reaching the Earth is affected by the strength of the Sun's magnetic field. So the magnetic field of the Sun is almost like a gateway controlling the cosmic radiation reaching the Earth. The magnetic strength of the Sun is also related to the number of sunspots. So they are directly related to changes within the inner structure of the Sun. The amount of cosmic radiation reaching the lower atmosphere creates more cloud, right? And cloud forms, you need to have what are called condensation nuclei. That is, little particles around which water can change from water vapor or gas into water droplets, minute particles that are visible in the form of clouds. We've known for a long time that there was more cloud than the amount of particles in the atmosphere, because we assumed it was clay particles and salt particles that were creating this condensation process, but there was this gap. We now realize, of course, it's the cosmic radiation that's doing it. So what the cosmic radiation is doing, controlled by the magnetic field of the Sun, is it's like putting up a screen in the greenhouse and blocking out the sunlight, and of course that then affects the temperature of the Earth. That's why there's a relationship between the sunspots and the temperature on the Earth. So we now know the mechanism, but they completely ignore that.
More than 31,000 scientists from across the United States, including more than 9,000 PhDs from the fields of climatology, atmospheric science, earth science, and hydrology, signed a petition rejecting man-made global warming as a scientific fraud. This shattered the hoax of the so-called consensus that the mainstream media had been pushing for years, that every scientist on Earth believed that man-made global warming was a fact.